Have you ever wondered why, in the middle of cities glowing with neon lights, surrounded by endless conveniences and laughter, your heart still feels empty? Have you ever realized that no matter how fast you run toward success, money, or love, at the end of the day, when night falls, you are still left sitting face to face with a nameless loneliness? People often say life is like a river. Not dramatic, but they are strong enough to change a life, and sometimes even the world around it. We often seek answers far away, while what we truly long for has always been within us. Enlightenment is not a destination at the end of the road, but every step, every breath, every moment we live authentically with ourselves. This journey can begin anytime, yesterday, tomorrow, or right now, in this very moment, as you listen to these words. So if you have ever wrestled with pain, if you have ever asked yourself, what is the meaning of life? If you are looking for a way, because perhaps within these seemingly distant stories, you will find your own reflection and the path to the peace you have been searching for all along. The journey to enlightenment. Stories that transform life. Since the dawn of humanity, people have always searched for answers to a simple yet elusive question. What is the purpose of life? Where does true happiness lie? From the philosophers of ancient Greece to the sages of the East, and even to ordinary individuals in today's modern world, there has always been one shared longing: to understand ourselves and to find inner peace. The journey to enlightenment is not reserved only for saints and spiritual masters. It is the journey of each one of us. It may unfold through the pain of loss, through relentless failures, or through the quiet restlessness of the heart. Every story along this path, whether from east or west, whether from a monk or from an ordinary person, carries within it a light that allows us to see ourselves more clearly. In this video, we will walk through stories that inspire, that sometimes ache, but ultimately open us to one timeless truth. Enlightenment is not found in distant, the very foundations we stand on. That moment could be a morning when we wake up and realize joy has long disappeared, or when we quietly look around a room filled with things we once believed would bring happiness, only to find an invisible emptiness instead. The beginnings of enlightenment often arise from such cracks, from the instant someone decides to leave behind what is familiar, to walk an unknown road with a single question in their heart. What is true happiness? 1.1. Sreri 1. Leaving behind the city lights. In a corner of New York City, where skyscrapers seem to pierce endlessly into the sky, lived a young man named Daniel. At 27, he had graduated from a prestigious university and landed a job many would dream of at a top financial firm. Each morning, Daniel stepped out of his luxury apartment in a crisp suit, blending into the rush on Manhattan's avenues. To the outside world, he was the picture of success, high salary, promising career, and a bright future. Yet at night, when neon lights covered the city in dazzling colors, Daniel would sit alone by the window, staring at the endless stream of cars below, haunted by a nameless. Yet when a child walked up and handed him a piece of bread, his eyes lit up with gratitude. In that moment, Daniel felt a shock in his heart. How could someone with nothing radiate a warmth that he, despite having everything, had never known? That night, sleep eluded him. Memories of his childhood in a small rural town returned. Afternoons running through fields, the simple joy of family. Meals, his mother's smile around a modest dinner table. Daniel suddenly saw that happiness had never truly been in the things he was chasing. After weeks of inner struggle, Daniel made a decision that stunned his friends and colleagues. He resigned, sold most of his possessions, and kept only a backpack. He left New York behind without a clear plan or destination, only a burning desire to seek the real meaning of happiness. His journey led him to India, where he attended a 10-day Vipassana meditation retreat in complete silence, facing the chaos of his own mind. The first days were torture, restlessness, anxiety, waves of thought attacking him relentlessly. He realized he had never truly sat still with himself, never listened to the depths within. Gradually, in the silence, Daniel began to notice small things he had overlooked: the sound of his breath, the rhythm of his heartbeat, the subtle movements within each passing moment. For the first time in years, he felt alive, not chasing, not striving, just simply being. After the retreat, Daniel continued traveling to a rural village in Nepal where he helped build schools for children, to a monastery in Thailand where he lived with only a few simple robes, to the mountains of Peru where he met pilgrims with stories of pain and resilience. Each place he visited gave him another piece of life's puzzle. There were times he faced deep loneliness, times he doubted his choices, but within those very struggles, a light flickered through. Happiness was not something to buy, not an achievement to go. That sentence haunted him. He returned, and he kept trying. The first weeks were torment, but gradually, fleeting moments of stillness appeared, moments when his mind settled, like a lake without ripples. In those moments, for the first time in years, he felt peace spreading through his chest. No equations, no theories, just the simple rhythm of breathing in and out, being fully present. Time passed, and Alexander joined longer retreats. He learned to observe emotions instead of being consumed by them. Anxiety still came, but no longer devoured him. He learned to smile when his mind wandered and gently guide it back to the present. He realized that intellect could help him understand the universe, but only stillness could help him understand himself. From then on, Alexander changed. In his work, he no longer chased recognition at all costs, but found joy in creativity itself. In life, he spent more time in nature, with music, or simply sitting quietly. But he was in no rush. He took a deep breath, and in that moment, he knew he was alive, truly alive. His journey, from mental breakdown to the quiet peace of meditation, was not just his personal story, but a reminder that sometimes, only when reason fails do we find the path back to the heart. 1.3 Story 3 The Woman Caught Between Two Storms, and the Search for a Peaceful Shore. Isabella Marquez was born into a Spanish family settled in Buenos Aires. From childhood, she was used to large family dinners, where laughter and chatter mixed with endless debates among generations. On the outside, people believed her family was warm and harmonious, but beneath that roof lay unresolved fractures and simmering conflicts. When Isabella grew up and built her own family, she thought she had escaped the cycle. Yet in her new home, the same tensions returned like an unshakable shadow. She married Daniel, a young and ambitious businessman. At first, their love was fiery, and together they dreamed of a bright future. But over time, financial pressures, clashing personalities, and heavy expectations slowly pushed them apart. Daniel immersed himself in work, often returning home late, while Isabella struggled to care for their two young children and manage the household alone. Many nights, arguments erupted over trivial matters, but they accumulated into deep wounds within her heart. Her extended family added to the strain. Her parents, after years of marriage, lived in a state of Cold War. Her younger brother was drowning in debt. Every burden seemed to fall onto Isabella's shoulders, making her feel as if she stood between two crashing waves, tossed about with no way out. To outsiders, she was still a strong, graceful, successful woman. But in the quiet of, and for a fleeting moment, she touched a pocket of silence within herself. Isabella decided to return, first once a week, then twice, and soon every week. Each time she sat down, though her mind was, but in returning to herself, embracing both storms and clear skies in her heart. This change didn't just affect Isabella, but her entire family. Daniel noticed the gentleness in her eyes, peaceful shore within her own heart. On breezy afternoons in Buenos Aires, Isabella often took her children to the park, sitting under the trees, breathing together. When someone asked her, "How did you overcome everything?" she simply smiled and said, "I didn't overcome everything. I just learned how to stay with myself. And somehow, everything feels lighter." Isabella's journey is proof that even within a family torn by conflict, even in a life full of pressure, one can still find serenity, if one dares to turn inward and listen to the quiet voice of the soul. Part 2. We regret to inform you. The repeated phrases cut into his heart like blades. By the 10th rejection, Ethan began to doubt himself. Maybe everything I believed in was just an illusion? He wondered. Refusing to give up, Ethan decided to start his own business. He pooled his small savings together with two classmates to launch a mobile app startup. In the beginning, Fueled by passion and youthful ambition, they worked tirelessly, often skipping meals and sleep. But the harsh market showed no mercy to their naivete. Within a year, the project collapsed. The company dissolved, and his friends went separate ways. Ethan was left with empty pockets, broken friendships, and deep wounds in his heart. By age 27, Ethan had endured so many failures that he could no longer bring himself to count them. Some nights, sitting in his cramped rented flat in East London, staring out at the city lights, he felt completely hollow inside. He whispered to himself, "Maybe I wasn't meant for success. Maybe this is all I'll ever be." One cold winter evening, wandering the rain-soaked streets, Ethan stopped in front of a small bookstore. Inside, a warm yellow began to read. The opening lines said, "No failure is meaningless if we pause to listen to what pain is trying to teach us." The words pierced straight into his heart. Until that moment, he had only seen failure as humiliation, as an ending, never as a possible teacher. From that day forward, Ethan began to shift his perspective. Instead of obsessing over quick success, he started to observe himself after every fall. Reflecting on past interviews, he realized he had often been overconfident, failing to truly listen. Looking back on the startup, he saw how he and his friends chased an idea without researching the market. Each failure, when viewed with awareness, became a mirror revealing himself. Ethan didn't transform overnight. He didn't become a hero instantly, but he built the habit of journaling after each setback, writing down what he had learned. He also turned to meditation, using it as a way to steady his mind, to avoid drowning in despair. In those moments of silence, he slowly realized that happiness was not about reaching the destination. It was about the strength to rise after each fall. A year later, Ethan landed a modest position at a small software company. The job wasn't glamorous, nor was the pay impressive, but his attitude had changed entirely. He no longer obsessed over early success. Instead, he focused on learning. Through nightclubs until dawn, Lucas Schneider once lived his youth as a man without direction. He was born into an ordinary family, his father a driver, his mother an office worker. Lucas followed friends into endless parties. At first it was just beer, then ecstasy, and soon after, heavier drugs. He found in them a fleeting escape, a false sense of freedom that convinced him he was truly living. But the deeper he sank, the more imprisoned he became, like a bird that had locked itself inside a cage of flashing lights and pounding music. His 20s drowned in smoke. More than desperate dependence, it was the moment he felt he had hit rock bottom. Weeks later, at the suggestion of a social worker, Lucas reluctantly attended a meditation session hosted by an international Buddhist group in a small temple outside the city. He expected nothing. To him, meditation was a strange ritual for people who didn't understand real suffering. But with nowhere else to go, he sat down on a worn cushion in a quiet room, scented faintly of wood and incense. The silence felt unbearable at first. For years, Lucas had drowned silence with music and chemicals. But then, the teacher said softly, "Just breathe. Nothing else is needed." Strangely, those simple words echoed within him. For the first time in years, he noticed his breath, something so ordinary, yet so forgotten. At first his mind was chaos. Memories of wild nights, his parents' scolding voices, the torment of cravings. All came rushing back. Yet within that chaos, there was a tiny spark. His breath was still there, steady, regardless of everything else. The next day, and the days after, Lucas returned to the temple. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for, only that sitting in silence made him feel a little lighter than being high. Slowly, he began facing the emptiness instead of fleeing from it. And in that stillness, he discovered that freedom was not doing whatever he wanted, nor escaping all bonds and hallucinations. True freedom was when his mind was no longer dragged by cravings and fears. That long journey began on that thin cushion. Lucas learned to watch he once did. Facing their uncertain eyes, he did not speak lofty philosophy, nor tell tales of successful recovery. He simply shared the first moment he sat down and breathed, the moment he called solitary confrontation. When Daniel Muller, a young man from Hamburg, set foot in Japan, he had no clear plan for his future. Turning 30 weighed on him like an invisible burden, failed jobs, broken relationships, and a constant sense of loneliness that clung to him like a shadow. His friends were settling down, colleagues were climbing the ladder, while he drifted, as if stepping into a void where no one could hear his silent cry. Japan came to Daniel not through glossy photos of Kyoto or Tokyo, but through a small flyer he happened to pick up at an international library. Monastic retreat program on Mount Koya. A sudden thought struck him. Perhaps I need to try something completely different. And so, a few months later, Daniel arrived at the weathered red gates of an ancient monastery, where the echo of bells resonated through cedar forests like the timeless breath of the earth. At first, Daniel was almost in shock. The elderly Japanese monk spoke little. Blaring music, endless streams of social media notifications. Here, all of it vanished. What remained was only himself, bare, raw, and empty. In long meditation sessions, Daniel's limits revealed themselves mercilessly. His legs throbbed with pain, his back ached, and his mind bucked wildly like an untamed horse. The harder he tried to focus, the more fragmented he became. He asked himself, why am I here? Was this a mistake? But then, one misty morning, seated in the main hall among the monks, Daniel suddenly felt a rare moment of stillness. For just a few seconds, the noise in his head ceased. No questions, no judgments, only steady breathing and the temple bell echoing in the distance, reminding him that he was alive. That fleeting moment was enough to convince him to stay. Mountains, Daniel realized that loneliness was not merely the absence of others, but an inner void. He had tried to fill that void with work, romance, travels, and countless distractions. Yet only when he stopped and faced it did he see its true nature, not an abyss, but a doorway. A venerable monk sat beside him, silent for a long time before saying softly, "When you stop running, you will see you've been home all along." Those words washed over him like cool water, cleansing years of confusion. Daniel understood then that he had been running from himself, and that was why loneliness had never left him. After a year in the monastery, Daniel returned from Japan. He did not become a monk, nor did he carry any grand title, but there was a new light in his eyes. Back in Hamburg, amid the pace of Western life, he still began his mornings in silence, simply breathing. Loneliness no longer frightened him, for it had become his most honest companion. Daniel's story is not about finding the ultimate answer, but about a journey of courage. We may sometimes find a teacher, not just one who guides our steps, but one who awakens the light within our hearts. 3.1. Story 7. The Unexpected Meeting on a Distant Path. Isabella Rossi, an Italian woman in her mid-30s, had lived for years in the whirlwind of work pressure. She was a manager in a fashion company in Milan, a city of relentless pace, fierce competition. Asia, carrying only light luggage, in search of silence for her weary soul. Her travels led her to Dharamshala, in northern India, a mountain town known as a spiritual center, home to monasteries. Nestled in pine forests, where many seekers came to find stillness. One chilly afternoon, while walking along a dusty mountain path, Isabella encountered an elderly man, dressed in a simple brown robe, with a bamboo staff in hand. He sat calmly on a rock as if waiting. When Isabella passed by, he looked up and smiled. That smile made her stop. He was no familiar face, yet the serenity in his gaze seemed to pierce through her. He asked gently in English, "What are you searching for on this road?" The question struck her heart. Forcing a smile, she replied, "I'm just walking." She was searching, though she could not name what it was. Thus began Isabella's conversations with him. He introduced himself as Tenzin, a scholar who had studied Buddhism for many years and now lived simply near a monastery. He was not a renowned master with disciples, but, as he said, just another traveler on the path of learning. Over the days, Isabella often returned to talk with Tenzin. They sat on the hillside, sometimes in silence, sometimes exploring the questions she had never voiced aloud. Why do people always chase things outside themselves, never satisfied? Why does having more make me feel emptier? Tenzin never gave direct answers. Instead, he offered small parables. One day, he picked up a yellow leaf, placed it in her hand, and said, "Look at this leaf. Once it was green and full of life. Now it withers and falls. Yet it does not mourn, It does not cling, it simply returns to the earth. Humans, however, always try to hold on to. Isabella meditated with Tenzin in the pine forest. At first her mind swirled chaotically with city noise, work stress, and broken memories. But slowly, through each gentle breath, the haze lifted. In a rare moment, she felt a deep stillness. Only the wind through the trees and the quiet beat of her heart. In that stillness, she understood. What she had been seeking was never far. Not in Milan. Not in a man. Not in a glittering career. It was within herself, waiting for her to stop and listen. The encounter with Tenzin did not last long. One morning, when Isabella returned to their usual place, he was gone. A friend at the monastery handed her a message he had left. Do not search for me. Continue searching for yourself. Shortly after, Isabella left Dharamshala and returned to Italy. But she was no longer the same woman. To her friends, she still worked, still socialized. But there was a newfound calm within her. She no longer chased frantically, no longer felt the same emptiness. That brief meeting with Tenzin became a turning point in Isabella's life. It was like a small lantern lit in the darkness, not bright enough to reveal the whole road, but enough to show her that she was walking in the right direction. From then on, every step she took, whether in Milan or anywhere else, carried a quiet peace she had never known before. 3.2. Story 8. The Moment on the Bridge and the Secret of Karma. In a bustling modern city in Europe, where glass towers pierced the sky and endless streams of cars flowed through the streets, there lived a man named Daniel Muller. He was a German engineer in his early 30s, successful in his career, yet burdened with a heavy, closed-off heart. Daniel did not believe in religion, nor did he care about the concepts of karma, or cause and effect. To him, life was nothing but a chain of random events, sometimes lucky, sometimes tragic, with no hidden law behind it. Yet, one autumn evening, in a fleeting moment, all his hardened beliefs began to waver. That day, after a long and stressful shift at work, Daniel decided to walk home across an old bridge spanning the Elbe River. Twilight was settling in, and the yellow streetlights along the bridge had just flickered on, casting long shadows on the rippling water below. Daniel walked on, his mind still tangled in meetings, deadlines, and the growing emptiness in his chest. Suddenly, he heard a muffled sob. He stopped, and a little further away, he noticed a young woman standing dangerously close to the railing. She was trembling, clutching the cold iron bars, her swollen eyes fixed on the dark water beneath. No one else seemed to notice, as the crowd moved on, each lost in their own concerns. At that moment, Daniel could have kept walking, pretending not to see. But for reasons he couldn't explain, his feet froze. His heart pounded, and he stepped closer. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice unsteady. Speaking softly. "Whatever you're going through, please, don't do something you'll regret. At least, give me a chance to listen to your story." The silence stretched endlessly. Finally, the woman broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, and let Daniel pull her away from the edge. He guided her to a bench nearby. Her name was Sophia. She was from Spain, having recently moved to Hamburg for. Approach Sophia, it wasn't reason that drove him. It felt like some invisible force guiding him. Now, as he witnessed the circle of cause and effect unfold before his eyes, from one chance encounter to a ripple of profound change, Daniel could no longer deny it. Life was not meaningless, nor random. There are moments when a single outstretched hand can alter the entire course of fate. And Daniel, though no saint and no believer, had become a link in the endless chain of karma. From that day on, Daniel lived differently. He became less closed, less skeptical, more open-hearted. He no longer saw karma as a mystical belief, but as an undeniable truth. Sow comfort, and you reap trust. Sow a smile, and you reap hope. And sometimes, just one small act can save an entire life. 3.3. Story 9. The people who carried scars yet shined with light. In a small village by Lake Geneva, Switzerland, where snow-capped mountains mirrored themselves on the clear water, Anna, a Polish journalist, began a very personal journey. She had not come here to write a feature as usual, but to search for an answer to the emptiness inside her, after years of chasing success. But one day, at a meditation session in Cape Town, He realized he had been feeding his pain every single day. He began learning how to let go, not to forget, but to stop allowing the past to chain him, even with a broken heart. The next day, Anna met Aisha, a woman from Afghanistan. She had fled from war after witnessing her parents killed before her eyes. In her years of exile in Europe, memories, Aisha said, but slowly I saw that it was running away that gave them power. When I dared to breathe with the pain, it no longer threatened me. Today, Aisha teaches yoga and meditation to other refugee women, offering them hope that the past does not have to be a life sentence. Listening to her, Anna suddenly felt ashamed. The greatest pain in her life had only been a failed enter. On the final night of the retreat, everyone sat in a circle around candles, offering a prayer for all people in suffering. For the first time in years, Anna allowed her tears to fall freely. They were not tears of resentment or despair, but tears of release, tears of peace, when she realized she was never alone on this path. The people before her, Thomas, Aisha, and many others, were living proof of human resilience, that when one learns to accept, to turn inward for refuge, one discovers an inner sanctuary no one can take away, a mindful awareness, a stillness in the storm. Anna left the lakeside village with a transformed heart. She no longer sought a perfect answer to life, but only wished to walk step by step, learning to listen, learning to open, and trusting that, even within tragedy, the seeds of peace and compassion could still grow. The encounter with those who carried scars yet shined with light became a profound source of inspiration for her journey ahead, and Anna knew that from then on, whenever she faced hardships, she would remember their eyes, the eyes that had seen darkness yet still sparkled with an unshakable light. Part 4. Confronting the Ego, Awakening from Within. In the search for life's meaning, perhaps no challenge is greater than facing one's own ego. Wealth, fame, power, all can make us believe we are holding happiness in our hands, but in truth, they are fragile illusions. In this part, we will step into the stories of those who once stood on the peak of worldly success, yet suddenly chose a turning point that seemed incomprehensible to others. They dared to let go of everything that people dream of, to face their own hearts, and in doing so, discovered true freedom. 4.1. Story 10. When the seat of power turns hollow. In New York, the city that never sleeps, where the dazzling lights of Times Square outshine even the night sky, there was a man named Richard Moore. He was once the very symbol of success in the world of finance. By the age of 45, Richard had become the CEO of an international investment firm, owned a luxurious penthouse on the 70th floor, overlooking the Hudson River, traveled in a private limousine, and often appeared on the covers of leading business magazines. People looked at him with admiration, even envy. To most, Richard was the perfect role model, intelligent, decisive, wealthy, and powerful. Yet few knew that after every grand meeting, after every glass of champagne at glamorous parties, he often returned to his penthouse, sat alone in the dark, and felt a profound emptiness gnawing at his soul. That emptiness did not appear overnight. It built up over years. From mornings he woke up in tension, from cold handshakes made only to sign another deal, from the false smiles of social niceties. In his youth, Richard believed that wealth and fame would free him from insecurity. But now, having everything, he felt more shackled than ever. One winter night, after returning from a fundraising gala, Richard stood at the window, gazing at the lights below. He asked himself, on meditation at a small library in Brooklyn. The speaker was an elderly Japanese monk, frail in body but with eyes that shone with clarity. He did not speak much about philosophy, only about sitting quietly and observing the breath, about learning to listen to one's own restlessness instead of running away from it. Those words struck Richard's heart like an arrow. He realized that for years, he had only run, only climbed, only tried to prove his worth through the eyes of others. He had never once sat down with himself, never truly listened to his own exhausted soul. Richard began exploring meditation. At first, it was just 10 minutes each morning, but gradually, he felt something shifting. He noticed the chaos of his mind, the restlessness that kept him from peace. Yet Richard remained steadfast. At his final board meeting, he said, "I cannot lead others when I myself am lost. I want to learn how to live before it's too late." Many laughed at those words, but some employees silently pondered them. Richard left New York for a small monastery in the Himalayas. There were no smartphones, no billion-dollar contracts, only the sound of temple bells, the mountain wind, and long hours of meditation. At first, he struggled with discomfort and the constant urge to return to his old life. But slowly, silence became his teacher. He learned to sweep the courtyard, cook meals, fetch water, starting life again from the simplest tasks. He realized how small he was compared to nature and discovered how something as simple as a warm bowl of rice or a sip of cool water could bring joy he had never known. Years later, Richard was no longer the dazzling CEO the world once knew. He lived simply, teaching meditation to communities, helping those drowning in stress and anxiety to find balance again. When asked if he regretted leaving the peak of his career, Richard only smiled. "I didn't give anything up. I only laid down a burden I once mistook for treasure." Richard's story puzzled many, but it also became a wake-up call for those trapped in the whirlpool of ambition. For sometimes, to truly find happiness, one must have the yet also the most beautiful path a human being can walk. 4.2. Story 11. The Wound That Couldn't Be Spoken, and a Young Woman's Journey of Letting Go. In a quiet corner of Barcelona, woman sitting alone by the window, a steaming cup of coffee before her, and a worn notebook resting on the table. Her name was Isabella. She was only 23, an age when many are still burning with dreams and an unshakable faith in the future. But Isabella's eyes carried a depth of sorrow, as though behind her gentle appearance lived memories she could not escape. She had been raised by her grandmother after her parents divorced and drifted away from her life. Her childhood was marked by unanswered phone calls, broken promises, and nights of muffled sobs in her small bedroom. As she grew older, Isabella tried to outrun the past by immersing herself in study and later in work. She became a young photographer, known in Barcelona for exhibitions of hauntingly beautiful images. Viewers praised the delicate melancholy in her frames, yet few realized each photograph was a fragment of her wounded memory transmuted into art. Outwardly successful, inwardly tormented, this was Isabella's reality. Night after night, she dreamt of her younger self, waiting on the steps for a father who never came. In relationships, she was gripped by fear of abandonment. Lecture on meditation and emotional healing, given by a Japanese professor at a cultural institute in Barcelona. The elderly woman, her hair silver and her voice serene, spoke of losing her husband. Project, not of sorrow, but of people who had faced tragedy yet lived with love. She met a woman who had lost her child yet cared for orphans. She photographed an old man once betrayed, now patiently tending his garden to share vegetables with neighbors. Each person she encountered revealed to her that suffering was not an end, but the beginning of greater compassion. When the exhibition opened, visitors noticed a new Isabella. The photographs radiated warmth instead of coldness. At the opening, someone asked, "Why do your photos look so different this time?" Isabella smiled softly. "Because, for the first time, I've learned to forgive the past, to forgive my parents and myself." From then on, Isabella was no longer the solitary girl hidden away in a cafe corner. She began teaching photography to underprivileged children, using her lens to tell stories of hope and resilience. Though sad memories sometimes returned, she knew now how to embrace them instead of being ruled by them. Her story spread, not as a tragedy, but as a testament to the power of letting go. Because letting go does not mean forgetting. It means no longer allowing the past to define the present. And so this young woman, once trapped in sorrow, became a small light for others wandering in the shadows of their own memories. 4.3. Story 12. When Silence Swallows the and drove straight to the far north. He rented a small wooden cabin, with no phone, no internet, only a wood stove, a few old books, and a worn guitar. From then on, he began a strange journey, living with absolute loneliness. At first, Eric felt relief, as though he had cast off a 1,000-pound burden. No more relentless emails, no more endless calls, no more forced smiles at social gatherings. But as the silence stretched on, strange echoes rose from within. The long Nordic nights fell, without a single light, only the whistling wind across the roof and the sound of his own heartbeat. In those moments, Eric realized he had never truly been with himself. His whole life, he had chased after others, after recognition, after society's measures of success. But when stripped, eyes as she said goodbye, he remembered his 2 children and the faded drawing they once gave him. Everything replayed like a slow film in the dark cabin. Yet, in that pain, Eric began to discover something. One morning, when the winter sun finally broke through after weeks of absence, light poured into the cabin, illuminating every speck of dust in the air. Eric sat quietly watching, and in that moment, he felt a wonder of life he had never known. He suddenly understood. The essence of life was not in applause, nor in the recognition of others. It was in the breath moving in and out of his chest, in witnessing a single ray of light piercing the darkness, in realizing he still existed. In the days that followed, Eric began to keep a journal. He wrote down each thought, each small awakening. One day he wrote, "I've lived more than 40 years, but only today did I truly hear the song of birds in the distance, as if the universe itself was whispering to me." Just as the frozen winter was part of the north. Without darkness, he would never have recognized the value of a single ray of light. After a year of seclusion, Eric returned to Oslo. People were astonished to see how calm he had become. He no longer sought the spotlight in parties or multi-million-dollar contracts. Instead, he opened a small space to teach meditation and share his. And from then on, he knew life, no matter how fragile or harsh, always holds a quiet beauty for those brave enough to listen. Part 5. Enlightenment in Action, Turning Teachings into Deeds. The path of awakening does not end with knowledge or sacred texts. It becomes truly alive when put into practice, when principles are transformed into actions in daily life. From work and relationships to guiding forces for action, bringing healing not only to themselves, but also spreading light to their communities. 5.1. Story 13. When a businessman brought meditation and compassion into his company. In San Francisco, where glass towers reflect the sunlight of the Pacific, lived a man named Jonathan Reed. He was the CEO of a mid-sized tech company, known for his strictness and relentless success. That event pierced Jonathan's heart like a blade. For the first time, he asked himself, what am I really building here? If people are reduced to cogs in a machine, what meaning does this? Studied Buddhism, mindfulness, and compassion. More importantly, he did not keep these insights to himself. He wanted to bring that spirit into his company, the very place where he and hundreds of employees spent their lives. His first step was to create a quiet room at the headquarters. It wasn't a meeting space, nor a lounge, but a simple room with cushions, soft light, and the scent of cedarwood. Twice a day, in the morning and afternoon, the company gathered for 15 minutes of meditation. At first, many employees joined out of curiosity. Some even felt annoyed, thinking it a waste of time. But gradually, that silence sowed a sense of peace they had never known. Jonathan didn't stop there. He changed his leadership style. Instead of imposing rigid quotas, he encouraged small teams to set their own goals, balancing capability with personal well-being. He introduced mindfulness days off, allowing employees to take full rest when stressed without the need to justify it. He hosted sharing circles where people could speak about struggles at work and in their personal lives. In meetings, he often began with a few minutes of silence, so everyone could truly listen with presence. At first, the financial world viewed this with skepticism. Many shareholders worried the company would fall behind by slowing down. Yet strangely, after a year, productivity did not drop, it rose. Projects finished on schedule, creativity flourished, employee retention improved. An internal survey revealed satisfaction and happiness nearly doubled compared to before. More importantly, this new atmosphere extended beyond the office. Families of employees noticed the change. One engineer said that thanks to meditation, he learned to listen to his son instead of snapping after work. Bloodshot eyes, his face radiated calm. His business decisions were no longer based solely on profit, but also on community and environmental well-being. He launched sustainable projects, supported charities, and encouraged staff to join volunteer work. When a journalist asked, "What made you change? Don't you fear that compassion will weaken you in a ruthless market?" Machine, it's a community. When that community is nourished with mindfulness and compassion, success comes naturally, more sustainably than any strategy. Jonathan's story became an inspiration for many businesses. Business schools invited him to lecture on mindful leadership. But Jonathan always reminded them, he was not teaching theory. He was simply sharing his journey from a man consumed of a simple truth. When the teachings of awakening are turned into concrete actions, they have the power to transform lives, entire communities, and open a new path where business no longer opposes humanity, but becomes a vehicle for cultivating happiness. 5.2. Story 14. Letting go to gain more. The journey to happiness through minimalist living. In the quiet suburbs of Copenhagen, where peaceful streets wind past rows of red-roofed houses, lived a woman named Elena Rasmussen. She was once celebrated as a symbol of success in Denmark's fashion industry, owning a luxury apartment in the city center, a wardrobe filled with high-end brands, and enjoying glamorous trips across Europe. To her friends, Elena embodied a perfect life. Yet, on many late nights, as the city lights shimmered beyond her window, she would sit motionless in her spacious apartment, overwhelmed by an emptiness she could not name. The more she tried to fill that void with shopping, life in Bhutan, often called the happiest country in the world, Elena saw images of modest wooden homes, children's innocent smiles, and a quiet peace reflected in the villagers' eyes. A question struck her. Am I chasing the wrong things? Could it be that true happiness isn't found in excess, but in simplicity? After months of reflection, Elena made a decision that shocked many. The extra time for a long walk around the lake. Instead of indulging in elaborate meals, she cooked simple dinners with local vegetables and discovered a purity of flavor she had never noticed before. The more she simplified her life, the more Elena rediscovered overlooked values. She read more, kept a journal of her emotions, and reconnected with family members she had once neglected. Transformation. There, she met a Buddhist teacher who smiled warmly after hearing her story. He said, "Happiness does not come from what you own, but from how present you are with what you have." In small gatherings, and later through social media, she didn't preach that everyone must give up everything, but encouraged people to seek balance and let go of the excess that blocks joy. Slowly, communities of minimalists across Europe came to know Elena, regarding her as a source of inspiration for the lifestyle of less is more. What surprised her most was this: the less she owned. Elena smiled, her eyes glowing. "I didn't lose anything. I only let go of what I didn't truly need, so I could touch what was more precious: peace, love, and simple joy. I didn't lose, I gained more than I ever had." Her story quickly spread, not only in Denmark, but also across international forums. In a world increasingly consumed by materialism, one woman choosing to live against the current, choosing less to have more, became a powerful reminder. Elena's minimalist life was not about deprivation, but a conscious choice, letting go of what burdens the mind, creating space for the soul to breathe and live. And in that space, true happiness revealed itself, not purchased, not dependent on others' approval, but arising from inner freedom. Her journey is living proof of the timeless truth the Buddha once taught. Desire keeps us endlessly lacking, but knowing enough makes us forever rich. And sometimes, to discover that abundance, all we need is the courage to let go. 5.3. Story 15. When giving more, we receive more. The awakening journey of a community servant. In a small seaside town in southern Italy, where winding cobblestone streets led to a harbor-filled fish market and the everyday stories of fishermen, Marco was not a successful man by society's standards, nor was he anyone remarkable. He simply worked at a modest bakery, earning a humble wage. Believed that life was nothing more than a series of sufferings. One evening, as Marco sat silently by the shore watching the sunset dye the waters red, he noticed a group of immigrants huddled against the cold wind. They had just arrived from a perilous sea crossing, their faces gaunt, their eyes weary and full of despair. In that moment, Marco's heart ached. He remembered his mother's frail gaze before she left this world and realized that his own grief was nothing compared to the suffering of those struggling to survive before his eyes. That very night, Marco brought the leftover bread from the bakery to them. At first, it was just a small gesture, but soon it grew into something bigger. He began to organize donations of clothes and blankets, going door to door through the town to rally support for refugee families. Gradually, Marco became a bridge between the local community and the strangers who had just arrived. The more he served, the more Marco felt every trembling word of gratitude from a mother given a blanket for her child. These moments washed away the heaviness in his heart like a cleansing stream. There were times when Marco was exhausted. By day, he worked in the bakery to survive. By night, he dedicated himself to volunteer work. His body grew tired, his pockets empty, yet his heart expanded. And in that relentless giving, he began to see something he had never realized before. Altruism was not only about helping others, it was a way of freeing himself from selfishness, from fear, from sorrow. One day, at a temporary refugee camp, Marco met a Tibetan monk traveling through Europe to spread the Dharma. The monk looked at him, smiled gently, and said, "The path you are walking is the path of awakening. For when you forget yourself and think of others, when you give without expecting anything in return, you are living the very compassion the Buddha once taught." Those words struck Marco like a beam of light. He realized that awakening was not something distant, not limited to sitting in a quiet monastery, but something that could manifest in everyday actions. Feeding the hungry, offering a smile to the hopeless, listening to the story of a stranger, all of these could open the door to awareness. Marco's story soon spread throughout the town. At first, people looked at him with curiosity, but later they joined him. That small community, inspired by one heart of compassion, became a place of warmth for strangers far from home. And in the end, Marco not only helped refugees, he also transformed his own town, making it less closed, less suspicious, and more loving and understanding. In a later interview, when asked what made him happiest, Marco answered simply, "My greatest happiness is seeing others suffer less. I once thought I was the one giving, but in truth, I am the one who has received the most. I received peace, connection, and the certainty that life has meaning." Indeed, Marco's journey proved something profound. Altruism is the key to awakening. For when we serve not for praise, not to prove ourselves, but simply out of love, we are living the purest essence of being human. The image of an ordinary man, doing ordinary work, yet creating extraordinary transformation in his community, stands as proof that awakening is not reserved only for those who meditate on mountaintops. It belongs to anyone who opens their heart in the midst of daily life. And so, that small seaside town was no longer just a place of crashing. Teacher, in life, no one can escape loss, suffering, and unexpected turning points. Some collapse under the weight of tragedy, while others discover a new path, a doorway to understanding and inner peace found right within the shadows. The stories in this part are not about happiness born from fortune, but about the transformation of pain into spiritual strength, where each tear becomes a afternoon. In a sudden traffic accident, Oliver was taken from her forever. Amelia's world collapsed in an instant. The house, once filled with laughter, turned unbearably silent. Toys still lay scattered on the floor, Oliver's drawings still hung on the wall, yet their owner would never return. Amelia did not just lose her only child, she lost her very reason for living. For months, she lived like a shadow. Work fell apart, friends and family could not reach through the wall of grief she built around herself. At night, she sat by her son's empty bed, clutching the old sweater he once wore. Every memory became a blade twisting deeper into her heart. She wondered if life was worth continuing at all. One day, at a colleague's suggestion, Amelia joined a healing meditation retreat held by Tibetan monks in Canada. At first, she came merely to escape reality. During the very first meditation session, when asked to sit still and observe the pain within, Amelia broke down in uncontrollable sobs. Tears streamed down her face, as if all the emotions she had bottled up finally found release. In the days that followed, she began to learn how to breathe slowly, how to look directly at her loss without running from it. The monk guiding the retreat often reminded, "We do not truly own anyone in this life. Children, parents, loved ones, all only walk with us for a time. Cherish them while they are here, and let go when the bond has ended." At first, Amelia felt angry. How could she let go of her son? But as she sat longer in meditation, she began to see the truth. Her suffering came not from Oliver's death, but from her own clinging to the idea that he must always be by her side. One morning, in the stillness broken only by birdsong, Amelia suddenly felt Oliver's presence, not outside, but within her own heart. He had not vanished, but had become part of the boundless love she carried inside. For the first time in months, she smiled through her tears, a smile of release. From then on, Amelia began her journey of letting go. She did not forget Oliver, but instead of holding memories as open wounds, understanding. To many, Amelia became a symbol of resilience, a woman who walked through the darkest loss and found light within. Years later, at a public talk, she spoke words that left the hall in silence. "I once thought my son's death was the end of all meaning in my life. But now I see. It was through that loss that I learned love, impermanence, and the preciousness of every breath." Profound teacher. When we accept impermanence, release attachment, and see everything as part of life's unfolding, we discover a deeper meaning. And sometimes, it is from within the deepest darkness that the light of awakening shines the brightest. 6.2. Story 17. The Scars of Betrayal and the Path Out of Darkness. In the city of Florence, Italy, there was a man named Matteo Ricci. Instead, that wound didn't just break Matteo's heart. It planted in him a bitterness that love was merely a transaction and that people were never truly sincere. Yet fate seemed not to stop there. That should have carried his name. Those years were filled with anger and resentment. Matteo asked himself, "Why is my life filled only with betrayal? Why is sincerity always repaid with deceit?" On many nights, he sat alone in his small apartment, drinking until exhaustion, as if only intoxication could numb the wounds in his heart. But when he woke, the pain was sharper than ever. Matteo realized he was becoming someone else, cold, closed off, and filled with rage. One day, while attending a lecture on psychology and Eastern philosophy given by a professor from Nepal in Florence, Matteo was struck by the Buddhist concepts of karma and cause and effect. The professor said, "When an experience repeats itself in your life, it may be a mirror reflecting the seeds you once planted in the past. Look at it, not to blame, but to understand and transform." That statement lingered in Matteo's mind. He began attending short meditation retreats, learning to listen inwardly. In silence, for the first time, he dared to ask himself, could it be that in the past, I too betrayed and deceived others? Could today's pain be a reminder of the consequences of the carelessness I once caused? The more he meditated, the more his mind opened. He recalled moments of his youth, when ambition led him to neglect those who needed him. He remembered promises he had, and heal. Over the years, Matteo transformed. He became calmer, less bitter, and more compassionate. When encountering deceit, instead of hatred, he saw people trapped in their own cycle of suffering. When thinking of Elena or friends who betrayed him, he no longer felt stabbing pain, but gratitude. They were the ones who pushed him onto the path of awakening. At a meditation center, Matteo shared with others, "Betrayal was once the greatest darkness of my life. But now I see that no one truly harmed me. Everything was cause and effect, and I too had once sown such seeds. When I forgave, I freed myself from hatred. And when I understood, I no longer feared betrayal, for compassion is the only answer." Matteo's story became an inspiration for many who were drowning in and freedom through compassion. 6.3. Story 18. On the Edge of Life and Death and the Moment of Truly Seeing Life. In a seaside town in the south of France lived a woman named Isabelle Laurent. And yet, deep inside, Isabelle always felt an emptiness. She rarely spent time with her family, with herself, or with life's simple moments. Everything revolved around work, competition, and the constant need to prove herself. Her health was neglected for years as she lived at a frantic pace, with rushed meals, wine and cigarettes at glamorous parties, and sleepless nights preparing for projects. One autumn day, while attending a show in Milan, Isabel suddenly collapsed backstage. After a series of tests, doctors revealed she had a terminal illness, cancer in its late stage, with little hope for recovery. The news struck like lightning. All the glittering success she had chased turned meaningless when faced with the truth that her remaining time might only be measured in months. At first, Isabel was devastated. She cried, she raged, she asked, "Why me?" For weeks, her mind was filled with fear and clinging. She sought every treatment possible, from modern medicine to alternative therapies, desperate to hold on to life. But the more she struggled, the more exhausted and hopeless she became, as the illness seemed indifferent to her will. During a stay at her childhood home in Provence, Isabel was taken by an old friend to a small monastery on a hill, where Tibetan monks lived and practiced. At first, she went only out of curiosity, seeking a momentary refuge. But as she sat in the stillness, listening to the bell ringing across fields of lavender, something touched her deeply. An elderly monk told her, "People only begin to truly live when they." She began attending meditation sessions, focusing on her breath and observing her frail body. For the first time in years, she slowed down. She listened to her heartbeat, felt the pain, and instead of resisting, she learned to embrace it. Through this journey, Isabel realized that life's true value did not lie in acclaimed fashion collections, in flashing cameras, or in praise. It lay in the simplest things: a family meal, the sunrise over the sea, the genuine smile of a stranger. She began spending more time with her aging mother and her sister, whom she had long neglected. She wrote letters of apology to colleagues she had once hurt. She even organized support groups for other cancer patients, encouraging them not only to face their suffering, but also to find meaning in the time they had left. Instead of counting down her days, Isabel lived each hour and minute fully. On quiet afternoons, she would sit by the window with a cup of tea, watching seagulls soar over the ocean, feeling grateful just to still be here. On other days, she walked through lavender fields, touching each bloom as though life itself was flowing through her. Despite her weakening body, strangely, as her mind grew calmer, her illness became less of a burden. She did not recover, but she was no longer afraid. Isabel lived many more years than her doctors. "Even as illness takes my strength, I feel more alive than ever. The disease did not kill me. It gave me new eyes to see life. In every ray of sunlight, every breath of wind, and every breath I take. That life has never left us, and that happiness has always been present in the simplest of things." Part 7. The Light of Enlightenment, when peace becomes reality. On the long journey of human life, there are moments of sudden brilliance, like a lightning bolt tearing through the dark night, illuminating a path once hidden by suffering and confusion. These are called experiences of enlightenment, when peace is no longer something distant, but becomes a living reality in each breath. The stories in this part are not ancient myths, but very human experiences, where, amidst chaos, strict rules of monastic life, his days seemed simple, repetitive, and quiet. Yet deep within, Tenzin carried a question that had never been answered. What is true enlightenment? As a boy, through the Dharma could one be freed from suffering. But by the time he was in his 40s, he realized that, though he had memorized countless scriptures and could explain philosophy to many, one winter morning, as the cold wind swept through the valley, Tenzin went out to gather firewood. When he returned, he saw a young novice trembling under the monastery eaves, his robe torn. Himself toward some imagined state, nor searched for liberation in the pages of scripture. Instead, he became more present to the life around him. When he saw an old man struggling uphill, he offered his arm. When he heard a child crying in the village, he smiled and played along. When a poor farmer came seeking advice, he no longer quoted lofty texts, but simply said, "Take care of what is before you, your field, your family, and your own heart." Word of his change spread across the valley. People came not to hear abstract philosophies, but because, near him, another. The answer may have surprised many, for it was too simple. But in that very simplicity lay the essence of enlightenment. It is not a distant destination, but a clarity in each moment we live. Truthfully, when compassion arises without calculation, The story of Tenzin Dorje reminds us that sometimes years of searching may yield nothing until the moment we let go of searching. And in that surrender, light breaks forth, not from outside, but from within our own hearts. 7.2. Story 20. A journey without a map, and the moment a young man found freedom within. In a bustling city along the Mediterranean coast, there was a young man named Matteo. He was born into a well-off family, raised under the expectations of his parents and the rigid framework of a pre-drawn future. His peers, Matteo made a decision that shocked his family. He wanted to travel alone, without a return date, without a fixed plan, just to find answers for himself. At first, his parents strongly. Then to India, Nepal, and even remote lands he had only read about in books. At first, the trip was filled with excitement, sightseeing, taking pictures, tasting exotic food. But the longer he traveled, the more he realized that the same emptiness lingered. He asked himself, I didn't leave the city just to find beautiful landscapes. I came to find peace within. But why is it still elusive? One day, while trekking in the Himalayas, Matteo and his group passed through a remote village. There, he met a shepherd boy, sunburnt, wearing torn clothes, but with a smile as bright as the sun. The boy offered Matteo a piece of dry bread, and when Matteo asked, Are you happy, living every day only with your flock of sheep? The boy replied, Of course I am. I have the sky. Village elders, listening to their stories. He played with the children, helped farmers harvest crops, learned to cook simple meals from local women. And strangely enough, in those small things, he found genuine joy, free from any need to display it. One evening, while meditating in an ancient temple in Nepal, tears suddenly rolled down his cheeks. Not from sadness, but because for the first, resounding through the night. In that moment, he knew he had touched what people call freedom within. After nearly 3 years of wandering, Matteo returned to his old city. But he was no longer the confused young man he once was. His family and friends were astonished to see how calm and grounded he had become. He did not rush into a prestigious job or follow the conventional path. Instead, Matteo chose to work as a guide for community-based travel, both to earn a living and to share the experiences he had gathered. One day, a friend asked, Matteo, what did you actually find in that journey? He smiled gently and replied, I didn't discover anything new. I only learned to let go of what was unnecessary and to listen to myself. And in that silence, I realized freedom had never left me. It had always been here, in my heart. Matteo's story became a source of inspiration for many young people in the city. They realized that sometimes peace doesn't come from reaching a distant, familiar circle to listen to ourselves. And in that listening, we may find a light of peace, a light that never goes out, because it shines from within. 7.3. Story 21. From the Abyss to the Light. The transformative journey of a man. In a small neighborhood on the outskirts of London, there lived a man named David. He was once the pride of his family, an outstanding student, a young employee, highly valued in his company, a man with a promising career ahead. But fate never walks in straight lines. A storm suddenly swept everything away. His company declared bankruptcy, and all his savings. Alcohol to numb the pain, to meaningless parties to fill the void. But the deeper he sank, the more lost he became. His family drifted away, friends stopped showing up. On long nights in his small, those days at rock bottom planted the seed of an unexpected turning point. One day, in despair, David wandered into a small library. He had no purpose. He just wanted shelter from the cold rain outside. But there he stumbled upon an old book about people who had failed miserably, sometimes repeatedly, yet managed to rise again and transform their pain into strength. He read without pause. Each page felt like an invisible hand pulling him out of the mud. He realized he was not alone in suffering. The world is full of those who have fallen, but also full of those who rose and became sources of inspiration for thousands, even millions. From that day, David began to rewrite his life. He no longer drowned himself in alcohol. Instead, he woke early to run. The first steps were heavy, but day by day, they became the rhythm of life. He learned to sit in silence, to listen to his breath, to realize that he was still alive, that life was still flowing in his veins. organization invited him to speak before a group of young people in crisis. David stood before them, his heart pounding, but when his eyes met their despairing faces, he felt as if he were looking at his own past self. He told his story, raw and unembellished: failure, collapse, despair, and then the slow rediscovery of light. When he finished, the room fell silent for a long moment, then erupted in applause. But what moved him most was not the applause, but the glimmer of hope in those young eyes. From that moment, David knew he had found his new path to make his life a living. Later, David became a motivational speaker. He traveled everywhere, from grand halls in New York and Paris to small community rooms in struggling neighborhoods. Wherever he went, he told the same story, with an honesty that struck deep, reminding everyone that failure is not the end. It is through failure that we learn to let go, to reflect, to rise again. The miracle was that he never forgot. Sometimes, the very moment we think we've lost everything is the chance to find what is most precious: inner strength, resilience, and compassion. He not only transformed his own life, but also became a small flame warming thousands of others. And in the end, he realized, happiness is not about never falling, but about smiling and rising each time we do. From darkness, light shines brighter. And from failures that seem beyond repair, a person can emerge as an endless source of inspiration for the world. Part 8. Messages from the journey, lessons for the viewer. There are stories that do not stop at the suffering or transformation of one individual, but leave behind a message meant for anyone who listens. Life keeps sending us lessons, yet not everyone is awake enough to see them. In this part, we will step into deeply personal journeys, where each character, through pain and downfall, discovered a light that guided them back. These lessons are not theirs alone. The ancient seaside city of Barcelona, there lived a woman named Isabella. She was born into a wealthy family, raised in the comfort of luxury. To the outside world, Isabella's life seemed flawless. A prestigious job in the fashion industry, glamorous parties, and lavish travels. But deep inside, she carried an emptiness that words could hardly describe. Each night, as the city lights shimmered beyond her window, Isabella would lie awake on her expensive yet cold bed, weighed down by something invisible. It was not sadness born from a lack of money or companionship, but a quiet, gnawing wound, like an unseen cut that never stopped festering in her soul. She tried many times to fill the void. She bought endlessly, worked without rest, and dove into fleeting romances. Before her was not the image of a successful woman, but a pair of lifeless eyes, lost within her own life. It was then that Isabella began to ask, what am I truly living for? Where does this pain? After listening to Isabella speak about her emptiness and silent pain, he simply smiled and said, you don't need to run away. Turn back and face yourself. All the answers are there. At first, she didn't understand. But at the monastery, Isabella was encouraged to meditate each morning. In the beginning, even 5 minutes made her restless. Old memories, long-buried emotions, resurfaced and nearly suffocated her. Yet day after day, little by little, she learned to follow her breath, to look straight at the pain instead of avoiding it. She discovered that her emptiness. But deep down, she longed for something far simpler. To be loved, to be accepted just as she was. When Isabella finally recognized this, she cried. The tears were no longer bitter, but liberating. For the first time, she understood the root of her suffering, and once named, the pain no longer held power as a mysterious shadow. From then on, Isabella changed. She didn't quit her job or abandon. To face it, to understand it, and to embrace herself. Her story reveals a truth. Sometimes the greatest enemy is not outside, but our estrangement from our own being. We may run, we may hide, but only when we dare to look into the mirror of the soul, to face the wounds unhealed, can we truly be free. This message is not only for Isabella, but for anyone grappling with emptiness inside. Forgiveness and compassion, the key to unlocking enlightenment. Forgiveness is never an easy act. From birth, humans carry instincts for self-preservation and resistance. When hurt, forgiveness, therefore, is not merely an action toward others, but a path of liberation for oneself. In Buddhist teachings, Forgiveness is deeply linked with compassion. Compassion is not merely pity or sympathy for another's suffering. It is a profound understanding that all beings are governed by karma and ignorance. When someone harms us, it is not necessarily because they are inherently evil. Forgiveness, under the light of wisdom, becomes a journey of letting go. Letting go does not mean forgetting or condoning wrongdoing, but rather not allowing it to continue binding the mind. Holding on to wounds only keeps them bleeding, whereas forgiveness closes the wound, allowing it to heal naturally. With each step of practice, one realizes that forgiveness does not just bring peace to the one forgiven, but even more importantly, brings liberation to the forgiver. Compassion is the fertile ground that nourishes the seed of forgiveness. When the heart opens with compassion, devoted her life to caring for orphan children. The common thread in these stories is not some external miracle, but an inner transformation of the heart. When forgiveness arises, studies show that those capable of forgiving are less stressed, less prone to depression, and have stronger immunity. But Buddhism goes further. Forgiveness not only helps people live healthier. As a form of meditative practice, whenever anger arises, we turn inward to observe it, recognize it, and not be swept away. We place ourselves in the position of the one who caused the harm, where no seed of resentment can take root. When one truly experiences the power of forgiveness, one realizes that happiness does not lie in winning or revenge, nor in worldly notions of justice, but in the lightness of the soul. Forgiveness is the first step, and compassion is the next step on the path to enlightenment. A heart that knows how to forgive is a heart that knows how to love. Enlightenment. Thus, forgiveness and compassion are not just noble virtues for living well in society. They are the key that unlocks the door to enlightenment. Every act of forgiveness removes a answer. In life, people are often obsessed with the destination. We are taught that we must have goals, achieve success, and reach a certain result before we can say we have lived a meaningful life. But upon closer observation, we see how many people, once they arrive at their final destination, fall into emptiness, disappointment, or even confusion. Meanwhile, those who cherish each step along the journey discover a deeper peace, for they do not wait for happiness at the end, but live it fully along the way. In many of the stories told in earlier parts, we can trace a common thread. The true treasure is not in the ending, but in the transformation quietly unfolding throughout the journey. A mother who lost her child found forgiveness not in the moment her child returned, but in each painful step of letting go of hatred. A father who forgave the murderer of his family did not find peace merely at the court's verdict, but in the long nights when he confronted the darkness in his heart. It was those steps, though heavy with suffering, that shaped them into different beings, deeper, steadier, and filled with compassion. A young man once left his homeland to seek success abroad. He believed happiness would come only when he became a wealthy entrepreneur and bought his dream home. But through long years of rejection, betrayal, and disillusionment, forced her to look inward, to recognize her own emptiness, and to fill it with self-understanding. As she began to love herself, the journey transformed her from a dependent soul into a free and mature woman. And just then, love, authentic love, came as an unexpected gift. A Tibetan monk once told the story of walking for months through snow-covered mountains to reach a sacred site. Yet when he finally arrived, there was no miraculous enlightenment awaiting him, only silence. What changed him was not the destination, but the daily walks, the fatigue, the moments he wanted to seconds, but what defines them are the years of sweat, tears, discipline, and perseverance. A scientist spends half a lifetime chasing a discovery. The world may celebrate the breakthrough, but it was the countless failures and relentless pursuit that gave him purpose. Looking back at the 15 to 20 stories of karma, forgiveness, compassion, and transformation, one realizes that the result is never the whole picture. The mother in the nursing home did not just face tragedy at the end. Her entire lifetime of coldness had already deprived her of warmth. The man betrayed repeatedly across lifetimes did not find his lesson in a single moment of awakening, but in each painful repetition. The reformed prisoner did not become an inspiration overnight, but through years of patience. Buddhism has long taught, The path is the goal. Liberation is not a faraway destination to be reached one day, but the mindfulness lived in each moment. When we walk in awareness, every step is nirvana. When we forgive and love, every day is enlightenment. And so, as we close this section, a reminder for ourselves and for all who are listening. Do not wait for tomorrow to live fully. Do not think happiness lies in some distant place. Happiness is in the breath you take now, the step you walk today, the kindness you can offer in this very moment. The journey is the answer. Do not overlook the small moments in pursuit of something grand. Let your heart be present, wholly alive in each step, live as if the road itself were the gift. For when you realize this, you will no longer need to go anywhere else. Peace, happiness, and enlightenment, they are already here, in the journey you are walking, right here, right now. Have you ever wondered why, in the middle of cities glowing with neon lights, surrounded by endless conveniences and laughter, your heart still feels empty? Have you ever realized that no matter how fast you run toward success, money, or love, at the end of the day, when night falls, you are still left sitting face to face with a nameless loneliness? People often say life is like a river. Not dramatic, but they are strong enough to change a life, and sometimes, even the world around it. We often seek answers far away, while what we truly long for has always been within us. Enlightenment is not a destination at the end of the road, but every step, every breath, every moment we live authentically with ourselves. This journey can begin anytime, yesterday, tomorrow, or right now, in this very moment, as you listen to these words. So if you have ever wrestled with pain, if you have ever asked yourself, what is the meaning of life? If you are looking for a way, because perhaps, within these seemingly distant stories, you will find your own reflection and the path to the peace you have been searching for all along. The journey to enlightenment. Stories that transform life. Since the dawn of humanity, people have always searched for answers to a simple yet elusive question. What is the purpose of life? Where does true happiness lie? From the philosophers of ancient Greece to the sages of the East, and even to ordinary individuals in today's modern world, there has always been one shared longing: to understand ourselves and to find inner peace. The journey to enlightenment is not reserved only for saints and spiritual masters. It is the journey of each one of us. It may unfold through the pain of loss, through relentless failures, or through the quiet restlessness of the heart. Every story along this path, whether from east or west, whether from a monk or from an ordinary person, carries within it a light that allows us to see ourselves more clearly. In this video, we will walk through stories that inspire, that sometimes ache, but ultimately open us to one timeless truth. Enlightenment is not found in the very foundations we stand on. That moment could be a morning when we wake up and realize joy has long disappeared, or when we quietly look around a room filled with things we once believed would bring happiness, only to find an invisible emptiness instead. The beginnings of enlightenment often arise from such cracks, from the instant someone decides to leave behind what is familiar, to walk an unknown road with a single question in their heart. What is true happiness? 1.1. Sreri 1.